Hello there, welcome to this channel. My name is Dick van Oeveren, and in this video series, it's actually the second video in this video series, I'm gonna start configuring a data center network using Aruba Fabric Composer. And so before I start, so this is the second video of a very lengthy video series covering data center networking with Aruba CX switching. And so let me show you the table of contents. So what am I going to show you in this video and in all the upcoming videos? So here's the list, and you can see it's quite a big list. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to discover switches, creating a fabric, assigning switches to the fabric. I'm going to show you how to set up a VSX, and also creating the layer 3 leaf spine fabric. And then in the next video, that's going to be a very short video actually. I'm going to configure the vSphere and Pensando integrations on Aruba Fabric Composer. In video 4, I will show you how to create underlays, overlays, creating VRFs, SVIs, doing things like enabling OSPF and stuff like that. And in the 5th video, I will actually start to create the overlay network. So provision the EVPNs by creating the networks, creating the EVPN instances, creating the layer 3 VNIs for symmetric routing, and also, there's like a VM environment built around it, so I can show you all the connectivity as well. And then in video 6, I'm going to show you the PSM the Pensando Security Manager configuration. So logging into PSM, showing you around the QE and what PSM is all about. And then in video 7, I'm gonna start working on the Aruba 10K switch, the 10,000 switch, by creating a very simple security policy in the Pensando Services Manager, blocking ICMP really. So it's really very straightforward and simple. I will create that security policy, apply it to the network, checking out the flows and see whether the security policy actually works. And then the 8th video, in video 8, I'm going to demonstrate micro segmentation. So this is really all about securing hosts that are on the same network. So for that, what we need to do is we need to implement a functionality called private VLANs. I'm going to show you how to do that. There's also a very easy way to demonstrate or to show how to create a distributed virtual switch through AFC, so you don't have to do that on vSphere, but you can do that on AFC as well. And then, just creating a security policy blocking SSH and demonstrating the micro segmentation. And then in video 9, I'm going to show you some stateful security in a mixed environment where you have 10K switches and non-10K switches, and you want to protect traffic that is going into the 10K switch. And that's going to happen in video 9. In video 10, actually what we can do is with the 10K we have stateful security, but because we're operating on switches, we can still have stateless ACLs being configured and pushed to the switches. And that's also something that we can do on AFC. So I'm going to show you that in video 10. And then finally in video 11, this is actually a very cool demo or cool configuration. This is where, based on the flow information that you can see in PSM, I can actually select a flow and assign it to an existing, or like create a new policy or assign it to an existing policy. And that's something that we're gonna do in video 11. Okay, so without further ado, let's start building the data center from scratch. Let's start by showing you the setup again. So we have two 8325s in the core here, and they will act as spine switches. We have two 8325s here that we will configure as leaf switches, and they will also be configured as a Vsx pair. I've got an 8360 here, which is like a, like a standalone leaf switch. This switch connects to another 8300 series switch that connects to the outside world. So really this would be kind of like the border switch, the border leaf switch. And then we have our two 10,000 switches here, the two 10Ks, which will also act as a leaf switch. And so let's start by discovering the switches. And so we have Aruba Fabric Composer here. Let me log in as admin and the credentials. And so what we have here is we have a clean AFC dashboard. On the right side, you can see a guided setup. This will allow you to have, like in an easy way, build your fabrics, create the spine leaves, create the underlays, overlays, and everything. But obviously, you can also go through the navigation here on top and going to the the relevant configuration item that you want to configure, so the relevant workflow that you want to use. For now, I will use the guided setup for discovering the switches. So let me just do that, and you can see that we're, for each action that you want to perform, AFC is using some kind of like workflow. So you just have a kind of like a sequence that you go through like a wizard. In this wizard, you provide some parameters, and then AFC will then, based on those parameters, will execute that workflow on the switches in the fabric. Okay, switch discovery. So what I'm going to do is I will provide the switch IP addresses here, 10.7.12.28, and these are all the switches that I've just shown you in the diagram. There has to be a minimal setup on the switches, so you can provide that through zero-touch provisioning. Really, the only thing that the switches need is an IP address, so that AFC can access those switches. So an IP address, an administrative user account, and the switch has to have the REST API enabled. So REST has to be enabled on the switches, and that's all you need as to the configuration. So it's very minimal. The switches already have been provisioned, so there's already that minimal configuration on there. So I can just provide the credentials for the admin user. Okay, and what AFC will also do is it will also create an administrative admin account for AFC, so that AFC can actually access the switches through that AFC admin account. Okay, I hit the apply button, and then what will happen is that AFC will start to discover the switches, and that will take, well, about a minute. It's 7 switches in total, so it doesn't take that long. And you can already see on the background that the switches are being discovered and built up. And you can also see that the switches have been discovered, but they are not assigned to a fabric. And that's what I'm going to do next. I'm going to create a fabric. I can also do that here in the guided setup. Create a fabric. Let's call it, just give it a name. And then the fabric type can be either data or management. A management fabric is typically used for out-of-band management switches. So if you have like out-of-band management, you have a couple of 6300s that you're using for OOB, you can assign those to a management fabric, which means that you can also, in AFC, you can also create multiple fabrics. In this case, it's a data fabric, obviously, because we are using our switches for data center networking. Let me just set a time zone. I think it should be Paris. Paris. And so this will create the fabric. You can see that the fabric is healthy. However, there are no switches assigned to the fabric. So the switches can be found in the unassigned section. So if I click on the three dots here, navigate to switches, I can see the switches here. And then what I can do is I can assign those switches or select those switches and then assign them to the fabric. And then what you can see here is that you have all the switches here, the Vsx switches, the 8325s, the 10Ks. And so when I assign them to a fabric, I need to assign a role to those switches. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to deselect the 8325s. These are the spine switches, and these are all leaf switches. So these would be assigned the role leaf, and then I can add them to the fabric. And then I can select the remaining switches. I can do select all because these are the spine switches, and assign the spine role to those switches. Okay, and then I just basically apply. And what will happen then is AFC will assign or designate the roles to the switches. It will remove them from the unassigned list, and it will move the switches to that fabric that I've just created. Okay, takes a while to update, and so you can see that the switches are syncing now, and some of them are synced. Cool. Okay, let's wait until they're all synced. Okay, and then so what I can do then is, so now the switches are assigned to the fabric. So there's no IP information or anything on there yet. However, the switches have been discovered, and what I can see now is that I can see the blue lines here. These are basically this is basically LLDP information that is exchanged between the switches. So based on LLDP, the switches have been discovered and they know who their neighbors are. Is the creation of a Vsx. So the two 8325s you can see here, I'm going to create a Vsx pair, and it's really very easy to do this in Aruba Fabric Composer. Okay, so I'm going to network Vsx, and so there's no Vsx's here, and I'm just going to create a Vsx pair. And I'm going to do this, I'm going to use the automatic generation of Vsx pairs. So based on the information that AFC has, it can automatically create a Vsx pair of the switches that are capable of forming a Vsx. Okay, so let's provide a name. Again, you can see if you have an action that you want to perform, it's really a workflow, right? So it's just a wizard that you go through, providing parameters, and then after providing the parameters, AFC will just execute that workflow. So for the inter-switch link settings, I'm just going to keep the default settings. So based on the network setup that you have, you might want to change, things like the hold time or the peer detect interval, those types of things. But for now, I'm just going to keep the default settings. For the keep alive interfaces, I will be using a point-to-point link. So that's a dedicated interface between the Vsx switches that will have a layer 3 connection. So that's for the keep alive. And another thing that we're using in AFC is that it's the resource pools, right? So we have IP address resource pools and we have MAC address resource pools. A resource pool is nothing more than a number of, well, in this case, IP addresses. And AFC uses these IP addresses to assign these IP addresses to things like loopback interfaces, point-to-point interfaces, physical interfaces. So it's really all about, it's like a resource pool that you can use in AFC. And that's really what it is. And you can create multiple resource pools. And let me just add one. It's really, again, very simple. And that's going to be 192.168.1.0. And I can do a /24, so we'll provide you with 254 IP addresses. Really very simple. And so what this means now is that this keep alive interface will use 2 IP addresses from this IP pool. Some keep alive settings. I'm also going to keep that to the default values. Some other options, and here you can see the MAC address resource pool, and that's similar to what we have with the IP address resource pool. So this is really for the virtual MAC addresses. Okay, so MAC address pool, and we're gonna use this range. It's 255 MAC addresses. Assign it. Hit next, and then so before I apply it, you can see what is configured, and then it's really all about applying that configuration. Now before I do that, let me just so normally we don't do this obviously, because with AFC you're not touching any CLI anymore. But let me just go to one of the switches and show you the Vsx configuration. And so you can see that Vsx is not configured. Now let me apply the configuration and move back to here. Let's see what happens. And now so you can see that it's still in initial state because it's provisioning. If I do it again, and now you can see it's operational. So my Vsx is operational now. And so it created a link aggregation to 5.6. It discovered the links that are connected between the Vsx pair switches. So it's so that's really, so if I do a show running Vsx, so this is everything that AFC has configured from from an AFC perspective, from a Vsx perspective. So that's really cool. If I now go back to visualization networks, and I can now click on Vsx as well, you can see this green link here. Let me just do a custom layout and move these things around a bit. You can see that the Vsx pair has been created here. Let me just move that as well. So that's the Vsx creation. Okay, next is creating the layer 3 fabric. The layer 3 fabric provisioning is really all about configuring IP addresses on the physical interfaces. Remember, it's a layer 3 fabric, so it's all routed links between the spine and the leaf switches. And so it's very easy to provision this through AFC, and let me show you how that works. I can do it here. I can do it in the guided setup in the layer 3 leaf spine configuration. I can also go to network leaf spine here. So let me do it like this. And so we have 2 options here. We have the layer 3 leaf spine and layer 2 leaf spine. So layer 2 leaf spine is really all about having layer 2 connections between the spine and the leaf switches, but we want to have a layer 3 underlay and using EVPN on top of that. So we're going to create a layer 3 leaf spine. And let's add one. And so I can manually configure it, but I can, automatically is actually very easy to do. So let's give it a name again. Settings. And so it's really all about assigning that IP pool, IP address pool. And so the IP addresses in this pool are going to be assigned to the physical interfaces. And that's really it. So it's really very easy to create this leaf spine fabric. So I'm going to do that. And it's going to provision IP addresses to all the physical interfaces of all the switches, and that's all in one go. I imagine that you have to do that manually on all the switches, and this is really like 30 seconds worth of configuration to configure that spine leaf. You can see connection is established, and then if I go back to visualization again, go to networks, and if I click on leaf spine, you can now see that the orange lines, they represent the IP links between the spines and the leaves. So I've got the Vsx link here, so layer 3 link going up, the 8360 and the 10Ks here. Let me just move them around so that you have a good view of how things are set up. And that's the layer 3 leaf spine configuration. Next is creating a link aggregation between the Aruba 8360-3 and a 8320, which you don't see on AFC because that's not configured in the fabric, but it is there. It's an 8320 that connects to the outside world. So it's really a link aggregation I'm going to create between that 8360 and the 8320. So I can do that by going to ports link aggregation groups. You can see that there's already there are already 2 link aggregations which I've created earlier when creating the Vsx, and I can then now add a single link aggregation group and just give it a name, 20, and the lag number, say lag number 10. And let's go to the lag switch member, which is the 8360-3. And I know for fact that it is interface 35 and 36 that is connecting to the 8320. Okay, let's hit next. And there are some additional parameters that you can set here. That's all fine because the parameters on the 8320 are the same. And the other thing that I need to set is the VLAN that I'm using to connect to the outside world, which is VLAN 1200. So VLAN 1200 is configured on the 8320, and I'm using VLAN 1200 to connect to the outside world. I will configure an SVI, an IP interface on VLAN 1200 later on, but yeah. But so this would be the layer 2 connection. Okay, let's go to summary. You can see the overview here. Apply, and so you can see that's being applied to the switch. Obviously, the information is not updated at this stage because it's being provisioned. And what I can do is I can just refresh the status and see what is happening. Let me just refresh the page. And you can see that the link aggregation is operational now. Actor status is in forwarding mode, so we're good on the link aggregation. And this concludes this video. In the next video, I'm going to show you the integrations that we can do in AFC So I'm going to show you how to integrate with vSphere and how to integrate with the Pensando Services Manager. So thanks for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you do, please press the thumbs up button. If you have any questions or if you have any feedback, also let us know, and I hope to see you soon. Thanks very much, and bye-bye.